I'm Richard Porter.
I'm Jonny Smith.
And this is On the Other Side of Things, the Smith & Sniff spin-off in which we answer your questions. Here we are again, answering questions on a Friday. And I'm going to start with one from a listener called Matt Poynton.
Go on, then. I dare you.
Doug DeMuro claims no good cars came from the 80s apart from the very end of the 80s. How wrong is he?
Totally wrong.
I'm going to say completely wrong.
Yeah, because you only need to look at almost all Mercedes of the early 80s to say that's horseshit.
Yeah, or the Audi Quattro.
Oh, yeah, there we go. One of my favourite cars of all Alice time.
Or the Peugeot 205, one of Europe's most successful and long-running models for mobilising normal people in a fun but useful way.
Golf GTI Mark II, probably the best Golf GTI all-round to this day for its time.
And let's be honest, Mark II Golf, again, what a brilliantly functional and excellent car that was, doing its job quietly and brilliantly.
Well, listen, Doug, if you want to contact us with a question for Otosot, you can.
Or just entitle your email, I'm sorry I was talking absolute bobbins.
Yeah.
About the 80s. I mean, maybe, is he because he's thinking of American cars?
Yeah, because there was a lot of crap. I mean, so the 80s is when Japanese cars came in to dominate the US big time.
I think it's when the Japanese car industry activated kickdown and really...
It really did, didn't it?
Took it, because the 70s, you know, once the Honda Civic had come along, and then I suppose the Corolla started to seem like a credible thing to buy.
Camry was the 70s.
And the Camry, and do you know what? When did the Camry arrive in the US? That might have been in the 80s.
Well, there we go. I mean, you could say, I mean, it's not probably an interesting car, but it's a good car in terms of reliability.
Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it? But domestically, well, the early 80s gave us the Chrysler K car,
which is a bit cack, I would say.
But I don't think it was terrible at the time, and they sold a lot of them, and it's, you know, in inverted commas, the car that saved Chrysler. I don't think they were completely terrible. I think some versions of them were probably a bit terrible. But if it's 1983 and you need a small, reasonably economical, reasonably nice-looking car, then I don't think it was awful. And then there's the Ford Tempo. Do you remember that? Which was, I think that was...
I do remember the
Ford Taurus as well. Again, inverted commas, the car that saved Ford. Certainly got them out of a lot of shit. And by all accounts...
The Sex Taurus.
But by the standards of the mid-80s, the Taurus was a really decent car. So even domestically, I think Doug's talking shite there.
I think... Listen, Doug, Mr. Demeanor, if you could please contact us and explain your workings, we'd be...
Did you call him Mr. Demeanor?
Every time I read Doug DeMuro, I say Doug Demeanor in my head. Every time. I just can't stop doing it.
My brain makes an even bigger leap because I quite often hear... Do you know a song called by the Monkees that goes Mr. Dobalina, Mr. Bob Dobalina?
Yes.
It was also... covered by who used it?
It was a sample by not Run DMC.
No, who was that?
Stella Soul.
Was it?
Was it Della? I want to say it was Della Soul. This is not a question for Otosot.
Oh, Del the Funky Homo Sapien.
Okay, so I was nearly there with the Del.
Yeah,
Della Soul. It's Honda Della Soul.
Anyway,
look. Well, so we answered
there
that.
There we go.
Did we? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't. No, there's just one caveat here. I've suddenly realised that Matt, our listener, has sent this question in. I haven't actually heard Doug Bob Dobalina claiming no good cars came from the 80s apart from the very end of the 80s. That, you know, it's always possible that Matt was, you know, hoovering at the same time and misheard. We may be besmirching Doug DeMuro with this claim, and it's not true. But so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it is absolute shit what he's saying. So, if he did say
Listen, he's doing better than we are. He's got a Carrera GT and a Ford GT. And he's got a much higher voice than me. So, anyway, I'm going to read out a question myself now.
Go on.
Here's another one. This one is an Otosot from Morgan Barnett with the title Running in My 5.0. Smith and Sniff, hello. I'm very excited that I'm due to pick up my first brand new car a week today. It's a 2024 forward Mustang 5-litre convertible in yellow with a manual gearbox. Like you, Richard, I tried to pride myself on my mechanical sympathy, often worrying more about how the car feels than my passengers do. For example, I have no problem jarring my wife's neck, swerving without warning to avoid the many, many potholes and manhole covers that festooned the roads of Great Britain. But forwards seem to have adopted a frankly alarmingly cavalier, in brackets ironic, attitude to such things, including pothole mitigation system, which seems to suggest you just blast right through them and absolutely no running in procedure for this box fresh engine. As this is the same company that chose to discontinue the ever popular Fiesta, I take their advice with a large pinch of salt and instead turn to the two of you. Oh dear. What do you do when presented with a new car? Do you perform the classic 1,000-mile run-in procedure of mixed driving with nothing too hard? I guess my question is, how long do I have to wait before I can do the obligatory 180 leaving my local car meet and go through a low wall? Thanks for the advice, you SSGs. Morgan. P.S. Jonny, we've heard so much about your brother Greg. It feels like we know him. Will you ever do the honour of having him as a guest on your podcast? Well, maybe you could make it a rule that your guest can only be called Greg.
I don't think your brother would do it. He's got much better things to do, hasn't he?
Yes, he probably has. PPS, Jonny, I once wrote to you when you had a column in the Sunday Times about the then new CO2-based VED bans. You printed my question and you responded. Thank you for that. It really brightened my angsty teenage day. Well, there we go. Thank you. Well, Morgan.
So running in is the original question.
It's basically, he's got, and by the way, well done on buying a brand new forward as a Mustang convertible with the manual.
That's exciting, isn't it?
That is exciting.
I think that'll be a very lovable car, that.
I agree.
You'll have a nice time.
I think you will. That's a car with serious character. What do I do? Well, I would do the classic 1,000 miles, because then if there's any problems thereafter, you can at least say, I did what I was supposed to do. And I nursed it. And I know a few people, in fact, we both know a couple of people that have bought Porsche GT cars, and they've done that really careful driving for 1,000 miles, usually gone on a kind of a B-road slow drive long distance for a weekend and tried to do 600 to 800 miles in one weekend. And then they know that the worst is over and they can start uncorking it a bit. So I think that's what I would do. And the other thing with a manual like that one, people forget about gearbox oil. So when you first start a car and you drive it for a few miles, the gearbox will normally feel a little bit more notchy, especially in cold weather like winter. So just be a little bit slower with the gear shifts, I would say, on that side of things. Yeah,
I mean, I'd always think that it's like, it just means don't absolutely thrash the engine, like pinging it off the red line. But in normal driving, you won't do that anyway. So just sort of don't take it on a massive rag, which would be tempting with something like that Mustang, because it's got a bit of cavant. But and also, years ago, someone from Fouts told me, just don't labour the engine.
Yes, because labouring can be worse than over-revving, actually. Yeah.
No, that was their main headline. They didn't really sort of say, don't use too many revs. It was more just don't labour it while it's running in. So, yeah, I'd still do. Something else which is funny was when I bought my Defender, because that was brand new, after 1,000 miles, and I did that's not really a ragged kind of car anyway, so I wasn't too worried about that, but I was conscious of not labouring it just in case. But after 1,000 miles, it definitely and rather suddenly seemed to free up. And I asked someone at Land Rover, and they said, yeah, actually, after a certain point, there's a different ECU map.
Oh, really?
The engine unleashes, so the engine actually is sort of deliberately kept a bit tight electronically.
I did not know that was the case.
No, I didn't know that, and I don't know if any other cars do that. I would assume so. If a bloody Defender with a transit van engine in it can do that, I would imagine that a Porsche GT3 RS might have something similar available in its ECU arsenal.
I was about to say, I don't think of Defender as being the electronic tour de force, so I'm thinking There must be others out there. Good question.
I have a question here from a listener in Germany, Sven. Hi, Sven.
Hi, Sven.
He says, he says, in the last podcast, you mentioned the Honda Beat with the Rave number plate. This got me thinking about the zebra seats in the Beat and whether this is the most Rave interior material offered on any car. The only other contender I can think of is the Jeans Bug / Peugeots. Oh, yes, because the Jeans Beetle
the Jeans Beetle
denim seats.
It did, yeah, it did.
So Sven asks, what other cars / interiors might have a chance at the title of most Rave interior?
Well, Sven, this is a great question.
It is a great question.
One thing I would say is that the Beat Zebra is up there, but it's not as
really is.
It's not as ravey as a Porsche Pasha, because that's one of those mind control posters, Magic Eye posters.
But do you not think also that it's Porsche Pasha could almost be made into a serviceable pair of Scar trousers?
Oh, chef's trousers, yeah.
Chef trousers / Scar trousers, they're the same thing, as we know.
Well, actually, they would be.
So
but
it's not Rave, it's Scar.
It'd be Magic Eye Scar trousers, so you'd think that person was massive, but they were actually really thin, or vice versa, like a hall of strange mirrors.
Not that I'm slightly obsessed with Honda Beats, but I think we know that I am. And I had a dream last night, genuinely, that I suddenly owned a Honda Beat.
Oh, wow.
But the stereo was missing, and I found on eBay a replacement stereo, but suddenly, as people who know the Honda Beat interior will be aware, the stereo is from factory is shaped to fit. But this wasn't. In my dream, the stereo was about 3 times as wide as a normal stereo and made of stainless steel and looked like sort of some kind of elaborate professional kitchen microwave. And my wife was going, "You're going to buy that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I am. I need it for the car." And she's like, "It's too big." And I was like, "It's not. That's the factory stereo." And it was ridiculous because it plainly wasn't. But the main thing was, I was like, "Oh, good, I own a Beat. So that's nice." And then I woke up and went, "Oh, I don't. It was a dream."
Did you feel like
I've achieved full obsession now?
I think you have to now, Rich.
Well, anyway,
maybe you should write to us as a pseudonym, in a pseudonym fashion.
Right to my own podcast. Yeah. Is that the first sign of madness?
I was thinking of Sven. I was thinking of the Recaro Spectrum graduated fabric interior, which I've just brought it up on my computer to look at, but I'm going to say that's more 80s than Rave. And although Rave started in the 80s, it's predominantly thought of as being an early 90s phenomenon. So I think I'm going to cancel off my Recaro Spectrum, although big shout out to Recaro for that fabric because it's bloody amazing. There's another fabric that's really good, and I think it's in a BMW Compact. It was very 90s and jazzy.
I think a lot of those... In fact, Japanese cars in the 90s they went quite big on sort of pastel-y smears, didn't they? And
yeah, they did. They did.
I'm trying to think, though, of specific examples.
Micro K11s. There's a few K11 strange shapes and textures. And
yes. And then there was a Peugeot 106 limited edition, not sold here, that had headrests that were the shape of a 106.
Seriously?
But they were still fabric. Yeah. Have you never seen this? It's amazing.
I have never seen this. No.
Hang on, I can't remember what the special edition was called. It might just have been called the 106. And sadly not imported here, but it was available in France. Here we go. Yes, but it also had incredibly 90s upholstery, light greens and purples.
Brilliant.
In sort of abstract patterns.
Yeah.
It almost looks like if you animated the upholstery of this car, it would make an amazing projection on the wall of a Rave.
Oh, yes, I remember those projections. That would be really good. Hang on, didn't the Escort Cosworth, wasn't there an interior fabric for the Escort Cosworth that was quite ravey and jazzy?
Oh, the car was called the 106 Cartoon, by the way, because they were meant to be cartoon 106s as headrests.
Well, this sounds like
the Escort. I don't remember the Escort Cosworth.
Unless was it the one that was called the? I want to say that there was some seat fabric from the Escort Cosworth as an option.
It looks here like it had what are those hexagons on randomly across the seats. Again, an incredible Rave wall projection if you could animate the seats of an Escort Cosworth.
Oh, imagine that! But also, it's prime Rave era, early 90s.
Yes,
isn't it? So
it's almost as if design and general sort of the shapes of the era were spread across all of culture, including car design.
I feel like Gordon Murray should, because he likes his Hawaiian shirts, as we all know. Maybe as he sort of perhaps winds things down towards retirement at some point in the not too distant future, he just thinks, I think I'll turn my hand to some design shapes for Rave projectors, and then starts doing that guerrilla projection where you project it onto the House of Commons and at 3 a.m. You project it onto, I don't know, politicians' houses and things.
Yeah,
I think he should do that.
Oh, you should suggest it to him. He has sort of mysteriously suggested he's working on some new projects, so maybe that's one of them.
I think he's
lightweight Rave projector.
Yeah. Oh, carbon fibre bodied projector, absolutely. That fits maybe on a pair of glasses. So you just stare at a building and it projects on there.
Is that safe though? So you turned around, you were just staring at a wall with the projections, and then someone went, "Oh mate," and you turned around and just projected directly into their retina.
He'd be in the zone at that point. He'd be method acting, so he wouldn't respond to anybody.
Okay.
Rumour still has it he listens to this podcast, although I'm not totally convinced he does.
I think he's got better things to do.
I do as well.
If you have got a good suggestion for a Rave car interior, or you are Gordon Murray and you've got a good suggestion for a Rave car interior, it's hello@smithandsniff.com. If you've got a question for this podcast, start your subject line with Otosot. It just helps us to find the questions in our usual useless organisation system.
This one's from Tony Stilling Warren. Hi guys, I was watching the excellent TV detective drama Ludwig. I've never heard of it actually, where the main character drives.
Oh, it's good, yeah.
Main character drives a rather nice 4-door Saab 900, and it struck me that in order to be one of the ilk, you have to drive a weird car. So, for example, Luther, Volvo 240. Actually, it's not a 240, that was a 740. Spender, Sierra Sapphire Cosworth. Inspector Morse, Jag Mark II. And then Carl Roebuck's Mercedes 320 TE 124 from the tunnel, in brackets, it's really good. I've never heard of it. Now, I'm pretty sure police officers don't get an allowance to buy some ULEZ exempt Scandi Rock box, so why do the production companies insist on putting them in something in inverted commas, quirky? CMTMB. Tony, that is really good.
Well,
we know that policemen in reality do drive diesel Astras most of the time. Or they did.
Funnily enough, this overlaps with a question I'd seen from a listener called James McDougall. And he said, have you noticed most Netflix productions have old 80s or 90s cars? In Sex Education, Gillian Anderson drives a W123.
That's right.
All the cars are much older than I'd expected in black dubs. Sharknose BMW and old Jag. There are others I can't remember. These series are set in modern times, so I'm wondering, why would this be? Do they source them from one person or a company? Is this to make the series date better or just to be cool? But yes, I think this is it. It's just to be cool and interesting, isn't it? And there's a very sort of pragmatic reason for it, which is if you have to shoot your hero travelling somewhere on public roads in a bit of traffic, it's very easy to spot them in a wide shot because their car looks different to all the other cars on the streets.
Yes.
It's the same reason why sometimes heroes seem to have unusually brightly coloured cars.
You were talking about this.
The yellow cars we were talking about with comedy characters, but it's always helpful to be able to do a wide shot and immediately you can spot that at the centre of it, there's your hero going somewhere before you sort of cut into a tighter shot. Yeah. So there's a kind of practical telly reason for it, but I think it is also just to make them seem more cool and interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And I think perhaps also for older people, it's a nostalgic trip because they'll go, wow, I remember those. But for a younger audience, like in, I suspect, Sex Education, I marvelled at what they'd placed and where, including some of the houses that they filmed at, lots of 70s and 80s housing estates and stuff. And I thought to myself, that's been done tactically, perhaps because it will pique the interest of a lot of young people who won't have ever seen an Austin Maestro before, or a Mercedes 123, and it might propagate some chat about, wow, that's a cool car. I've got no idea what it is, but it's cool. And
there's a young person that I'm working with at the moment.
We sound like such old twats saying this. You know?
I know it does.
There's a young person.
I'm working on a project where there's a team and there's quite a few young people on it. And one of the young women on the team the other day, she said, I saw a really interesting car on my street and I took a picture of it because she was talking to a pair of us who she knows are car nerds. She went, because I thought you two would like to see it. She showed us the picture. It was a Rover 600.
Oh, brilliant. I bet you... Did you go dewy-eyed?
I did.
And did you say, listen, I'm going to go and buy you a coffee. What would you like? Do you want the most expensive
coffee? Yeah, as a reward for taking that. But I thought it was really interesting that someone in their 20s, that something that, you know, probably you and I think is actually only stopped production last week. And we're a bit baffled by it initially, but certainly I was. But then you go, oh, shit, actually, no, wait a minute. That car is at least 25 years old, 26 years old. So so it is in fact at least as old as the person who's taken the photo of it because they thought it was old and interesting. And so if you're in your 20s, cars that we sort of imagine are still quite recent are in fact coolly retro.
Yeah. I have the bit of that with my Boxster where I go, wow, that's a 23-year-old car now, and mine's one of the last of the early first gen ones, so it's like, bloody hell, I knew it was sort of a modern classic, but that's quite old by a young person's standard, because as someone who's 20 years old, that's way older than them, so you just go, oh shit. But well, that's I hope more of that happens, and I actually think as somebody that's in the car media world, I was talking to someone called Greg James the other day about it, saying I feel like we owe it. I feel like we owe it to the world. It's one of our responsibilities as car fanatics, in a position where we can talk to quite a wide audience, to embrace this stuff and encourage people to kind of find a vehicle that they're interested in or delve into the history of cars, because there's so much of it, and if you don't pass it on to another generation in some way, it will just wither and die. And there's so many outputs for it, like video games and motorsports.
But this is sort of why, part of the reason why we found Festival of the Unexceptional so joyful last summer, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because it was a younger crowd embracing what were once quite mundane cars, but by dint of being rare now, sort of gives them this extra novelty value. And it's just lovely to see them, and it's lovely to see them being enjoyed with a real passion for keeping something older and a bit interesting and unusual going. We're
going to win.
This is not new in telly terms, though.
This year, I feel like I'm going to go hard on the Eagle. I'm going to have mirrors put under it, all sorts.
But it's just, I feel like it's never will be unexceptional. The Eagle. It's just,
of course,
it wouldn't be fair.
Yeah.
In telly terms, though, I was going to say to answer Tony and James's question is, I don't think this is new, because like Inspector Morse, when did that show start? 80s?
80s.
Or 90s, maybe.
I reckon it was probably late 80s.
Yeah, maybe so. And he was driving a Jag from the 60s.
60s.
So that was actually only a kind of 20-something-year-old car. So Inspector Morse, if it was made starting now, his interesting old car could in fact be a Rover 600. Would that work? Or have things changed? Is it there are more cars of the age of a Rover 600, including Rover 600s, still driving around because cars just last better.
Yeah.
That 60s Jag in 1989, say, would have been much more of a novelty because so many of them had perished by then.
Yes, very much so.
It's funny, isn't it? The same logic. It's just like, let's make it clear that Inspector Morse, he doesn't play by their rules. he's his own man. He's quirky and free-thinking, and let's give him a car that's not just a diesel Astra.
He counts the flashing LED lights from his ECU, which tells him what kind of a problem he's got, and he looks it up in a little booklet or on a forum. That's how cool he is.
Not in 1989, though.
Oh, no.
Unless he was so free-thinking he'd invented...
No, that's what he does now. That's what he does now with his Rover 600, and young people
go, a Rover 600 now.
Young people go, what do you mean counting LEDs? Well, the LED flashes in a certain sequence, and you look in a little book, and it tells you what the hell is wrong with it. That's the idea. My dad did it with his Volvo T5.
Oh,
yeah, maybe that's a car for I don't know, for Luther. Luther should go up for a T5 now.
It's the one thing it's sort of weird is when Inspector Morse was given that Jag as a character. I mean, I presume it's from the books because they were books before they were TV series, weren't they? So, did it mark him out as free thinking? Because now, if he was driving around in that Jag, there's a danger he just looks like an old fart, which in a way he sort of was, wasn't he? He was this kind of gruff old real ale enthusiast.
Oh, I think he was an old fart, and also driving around central Oxford in a car which is probably going to get very hot under the collar frequently.
I seem to remember reading about the production of Inspector Morse, and that car was a constant ball ache.
Yes, I heard that
in terms of trying to get stuff done, because you can imagine that it just kept overheating.
I think it was in shit condition as well, though, Rich, because it was. Yeah. I think it was a base model. I think it had a 2.9 or very small capacity engine, and it was had a vinyl roof, of course, which would have been fitted in the 70s or 80s just to hug a little bit more moisture onto the roof
on a wet day. It's really sealing the damp.
It was done next to the sea wall on Lyme Regis. And they just,
on a very splashy day.
They just glooped on the glue and just slapped it down with a roller.
There we go. That's it. There's some lumps in there. Yeah, that's just puddles. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
It'll evaporate.
Well,
funny enough, they used a Mark II Jag in. Do you remember the sitcom Bread in the 80s? The Carla Lane sitcom.
I do. I never watched it, but I remember seeing it in the Radio Times. That dates me.
I used to watch it. We used to watch it. For some reason, it was one of those shows I think my whole family watched, and I don't really know why. I mean, I remember it being quite funny, but I bet if you watched it now, it would feel achingly dated. And the oldest son in that, Joey, had a black Mark II Jag, and he was meant to be the cool one. Mm. In my head, I think he wore a black leather jacket paired with black leather trousers.
Black leather trousers.
It might have been black jeans.
So he looked like a bikerless biker.
Basically one of those people you go, "Where's your bike?" "I haven't got a bike. It's just for a look."
Nick Knowles.
Yes, exactly. So he at the time he was meant to be so cool that I seem to remember that he would arrive at the front door of someone's house. They'd open the door and he'd go, "Greetings," and that at the time seemed like he was, rather than saying hello, now he'd just go, "What a insufferable prick." But he had a black Mark II Jag, and that was meant to be part of why he was so cool. The weird thing about the guy who played Joey in the original series of Bread is that he went on to
expose himself in public.
No, he wrote and directed the film Sliding Doors.
Did he?
Yeah, which is one of those films that I remember at the time. Everyone seemed to be talking about it, and it seemed like it was sort of. It felt.
I've never seen it. I've read about it. And I've still
really good premise. One of those premises that slipped into sort of the popular lexicon, I think, because people will go, "Oh, it's a real Sliding Doors moment."
That's right.
And I watched that film. I mean, a few years ago now, but it was out in the late 90s. I watched it sort of like 10 years ago or something like that, and it was absolutely shit. So, no, that's not fair. The script, the dialogue was a bit shit, I thought. It was a bit excruciating. It is not dated well.
It's Chris Martin's ex-wife. It's one of her early films, wasn't it?
Gwyneth Paltrow, yeah. And also, it features the Aqua song that's not shit.
Not Dr. Jones, then?
Exactly. No, Turn Back Time.
Oh, yes.
Which is actually a good song by Aqua.
Yeah,
so,
Barbie Girl's a good song.
On that note, we should probably bring this to a close. If you've got a question for us, hello@smithandsniff.com. If you are Aqua, it's still hello@smithandsniff.com. Entitle your email, How Dare You? And we'll do this all again next Friday. Normal show on Monday. And looking forward to seeing some of you on Sunday at the Pistonhead Sunday service. We're doing a live recording, raising money for Mission Motorsport. So we'll see you there. If you would like to come to a live show. We're doing one next month in Eastbourne on the south coast on the 6th of February, Thursday the 6th of February. Tickets on sale now. If that's not to your taste because it's too far south, then come to Manchester on the 12th of March. We're doing one there at the Tesla Centre opposite the Etihad Stadium.
Tesla.
And we'll be announcing some more dates for later in the year very, very soon. But in the meantime, thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.